Greg, thank you so very much for asking me to launch this book, The Fights of My Life. It's a great honour and a task made easy because I enjoyed the book so much. As soon as I turned the last page, I knew that there was only one way for me to start this speech. And of course, it is with your candid revelation of a conversation between us. The one in which you said, "I'm stuffed if I'll be tweeting." A statement made in response to my suggestion as Prime Minister that ministers should be making more use of social media. Now, actually, the word used and recorded in the book is a little bit more earthy than stuffed. But I am conscious that we are still in children's viewing hours, and perhaps this is a very good moment to issue a more general warning. If bad language causes you to blush, then have a cold compress at hand which you will need to pat your burning face as you read this book. You will definitely need it. Indeed, some might suggest that Greg's aversion to tweeting is simply because he couldn't fit all the swear words in. But I think it runs deeper than this, and his retort to me stemmed from a concern that the complex business of changing the nation, of making it stronger and fairer, as we strive to do, is not easily boiled down to 140 characters or less. In my view, the problem Greg was really trying to name isn't one that only besets Twitter. Across the full range of modern media, print, television, the internet, social media, the drive to dish out news stories ever more quickly, simply because the technology means that we can, is depriving us all of context. So, a personality as complex and deep as Greg Combet arrives in Canberra, and because 10% of his life story is known, the remaining context, the other 90%, remains undiscovered. Effectively, the whole story is categorised as old news not worth telling. To borrow the words of legendary art critic Robert Hughes, the shock of the new now defeats exploring the nuanced depths of what has been. Ignored in this process is the way the past plays a role in shaping the future, how individuals are moulded, how their attitudes and predispositions come about, how their character strengths and flaws are created, and what the sum of all of these parts means for their contemporary and future conduct. So for me, the importance of this book lies in the way it beautifully gives us the context that enables us to better understand the large life and important works of Greg Combet. I delighted in the images the book gives us of the boy growing up on what is described as a small island, a time and place separate and self-contained, yet also part of the larger whole, on the Minchinbury estate owned by the Penfold Wine Company. Here and at his grandparents' farm, he lives a cocooned but not cosseted existence. His memories are of roaming the great outdoors and his own contribution to the manual work required in the vineyard and field. This childhood was lost with the death of Greg's father, but through the words of this book, we see the grieving child grow into a young man who emerges with an engineer's mind combined with a growing sense of social conscience and the firmest of lifetime friendships with Greg Withers, who is here today. Then we are all taken through the many fights of Greg's life, battles for fairness and decency, all of them. The fights in Greg's life include some that we fought together on workplace relations, creating an emissions trading scheme, increasing job opportunities. There is so much I could canvass on each of these, but it is not my intention to do so today. To suffice it to say that we shared a sense of purpose in each of these areas. We enacted reforms our nation needed. When we lost office, it was clear some would endure, some would be set back, only to emerge again in the future. Ultimately, good policy wins through. The fight I do want to focus on is the one told in what for me was the most moving chapter of the book. It is the epic struggle against James Hardie for those poisoned by its asbestos. the scale of the injustice, the cruelty of the corporate conduct, the courage of the victims, and Greg's sense of burning righteous anger burns on every page. Two sentences in particular capture the motivating power of Greg's emotions when he says, and I quote, "I sometimes feel a flame flickering in my guts, and when I see an injustice like this, it flares up. I remember being about as angry as I have ever been and determined to fight." We are given another insight into how remarkable a man Bernie Banton was, a tireless campaigner for justice, even as asbestos was killing him. When Greg asked Bernie to ease up a little on personal criticisms of those representing James Hardie as negotiations were in train, Bernie replied, "I'm dying. And what have these people got? Hurt feelings? I'll keep going." I acknowledge Karen, Bernie's widow, who is here with us today, and thank her for everything she and her family did and continue to do on behalf of all those afflicted by asbestos-related diseases. While intellectually you know how the story ends, the events are so powerfully retold that you cheer once again when the largest personal injury settlement in Australia's history is struck to benefit those so grievously wronged. In this fight and many others detailed in the book, we see the best of the trade union movement shine through. The values of corporate Australia should not be judged by the ugly manoeuvring of James Hardie to rob the dying, just as the values of hundreds of thousands of hard-working, honest, fair-minded trade unionists and their elected representatives should not be judged by the fraudulent conduct of the few. Greg, as a nation, we should be so grateful to you for having the energy, integrity and courage to fight so many good fights across your life. We have been enriched by your efforts. But as the book details clearly, we know that there has been a personal cost. Often that cost was borne by your family and friends, burdens measured in hours of absence and increments of lost anonymity. But you have borne it personally too, in episodes of ill health and times of exhaustion. Thank you for having the spirit to see so much through despite these difficulties. I thank you, and I also thank Mark Davis for bringing your life and thoughts to us in prose that always engages and often sparkles. I have known Mark, and here's a revelation about both of us, since I was an undergraduate and new activist at Adelaide University, and he was one of the editors of the student newspaper On D. I am not going to recount how many years have passed since then. But much has happened in those years, but one constant has been Mark's love of and skill with the written word. Of course, I am conscious that the political junkies in the room want me to tell one more story before I go. A paragraph with the words Labor and leadership is completely seducing for those who have spent most of the last few years churning out so many stories featuring those very words. For me, it seems enough at this stage to simply say this. Despite the best efforts of wonderful supporters, there came a time when it was clear to me that my leadership was very likely to come to an early end. My belief that the nation and my political party should be led by a person of good values and clear sense of purpose remained strong. Fortunately, the Labor Party is home to so many with these attributes. But my view was that the best person at that time was Greg Combet. I wanted to see the next fight of his life being for the support of his colleagues to lead the Labor government into the 2013 election. It was not to be. Now, Bill Shorten, as Labor leader, is taking his remarkable talents and fierce passion into the fight for fairness and a better future. I wish him and the team he leads, many of whom are here today, all the best. I and true believers everywhere are cheering you on. This book concludes with the following words, and I quote, My aim in writing this memoir has been to demonstrate why it is worthwhile to sign up for a life as a Labor movement activist, to demonstrate that people with common values working together can make a massive difference. Much has been achieved, much remains to be achieved. We need people with passion and energy, intelligence and good sense to join the Labor movement. For me, this has been a cause worth fighting for, and I hope to be able to continue to contribute. There's some fight left in me yet. Greg, I launch this book, confident that it will achieve your goal and inspire a new generation. I launch it with a hearty wish for the best of health and happiness for you and Juanita. I launch it admiring what you have achieved, but looking forward to seeing you win through in new fights and in new ways. Ladies and gentlemen, here it is, Greg Combet's The Fights of My Life. Thank you very much.